Great. My name's Erynn Schroeder. I am currently living in South Carolina. I just moved here about 4 months ago from Minnesota. I lived there for all the rest of my life, so 22 years. I started playing Ultimate in high school. It was really lucky for me. It was the first year my school had a girls' team. It was my freshman year, so I was the first one to make it through all 4 years. Um, and then I went to the College of St. Benedict. It's a D3 school, and I played on the women's team. We made it to nationals 3 out of the 4 years that I was there. And I played on various club teams in Minneapolis. I played on Pop. That was my first club team, the women's team. And then I've practiced with Dragon Thrust. I would never played a full season with them, but I know them all very well. And then I also spent a summer in Washington, D.C., and I played with the Scandal team. And that's where I met Amy. And then right now, hopefully this summer, I'm going to be playing with the Phoenix team. I've also tried out for the national teams. I think I've been to 5 different tryouts. I played on the under 19 team in 2012 in Dublin, and I played on the under 23 team this summer, 2015, in London. I also was part of the All Star Tour. And yeah, I love Ultimate, so let's talk about it.
All right. So for all those who are participating in the webinar, we'll have a little bit of a loose structure. It's an open Q&A for sure. We'll be taking questions as we go. We've got a few to prompt Erynn to get started, and then feel free to use the chat function down there. And at the end, we hopefully will get to everybody's questions at the end. This being a D3 focus, we want to really focus on sort of challenges with smaller schools and schools that are in the D3 division. Not just challenges, but ways to build a team where you have fewer people to choose from, and people are a resource. For those of you who don't know, just what USA Ultimate categorizes as D3 has nothing to do with NCAA categorizations. A lot of people who play in the D3 division don't even know that. It is simply schools that have enrollment of 7,500 students, including graduate students, 7,500 or less. So that's where we get the D3 designation. And I guess we'll start with some broad questions for Erynn and go from there. Erynn, so when you started at St. Ben's, for you, what was a D3 team like? What did that mean for you? I mean, having a small school and playing in a small school, what was that experience like?
Right, so I came in having 4 years of high school experience, and I was really just excited that the school had a team. I picked the school not based on Frisbee at all. I did want there to be a team, but I was really going for the academics and the smaller school feel. So at practices, I started out as one of the best players, but I was very timid. I was not a captain, and I really didn't want to give any input to the team because the captains had a way of running things, and it was just really fun to meet some new people. I was just one of the younger people. I didn't really go to the parties or anything, but I was very invested, and I came to every practice. Everybody knew I was dedicated and wanted to play all that I could. And I think showing my leadership on the field helped me become a captain sophomore year, and then I continued to captain throughout my time in college. It was really nice sophomore and junior year because I had 2 co-captains who were a year older than me, and they did all the logistical stuff, so I could work on the field things and kind of be semi-coaching them. And then senior year was pretty tough. I was captain again, but I had 2 new co-captains who hadn't captained before, and I had captained, but I hadn't really done much of the captaining things, like all the logistics and stuff. So it was pretty tough to figure out everything that we had to do in terms of the USAU requirements, trying to find practice space, and get funding for everything. It was sort of a challenge and kind of stressful for me, but I think that we tried to make the transition easier by writing down the stuff that we had to do so that we could give that to the next captains and make the load a little easier. So I don't know. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, no, totally. You mentioned, when you were a captain, you had to figure out the procedural things, sort of the USAU requirements, and go through there. And you mentioned sort of working with your school to get funding.
Mhm.
What was your experience with St. Benedict's in terms of funding and support for your team? Did they know about Ultimate Frisbee, or that's something you had to kind of explain to them?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of a funny story and it involves our team name. I'm going to go into this first. So when I joined freshman year, we were called the Ugly Hucklings and we had bright pink jerseys with yellow shorts. They had the atomic duck right on the center. And then the boys' team at St. John's was called the Badass Monks, BAM. And so we changed our name to the Bad Habits and we had a nun laying out across our jersey. And it was super, super cool. And then we started to get good, and we made it to nationals. And then our school is a Catholic school, and we actually have nuns on campus, and we represent them. And they did not like that we had a nun in full, like with the habit and everything, on our uniform. So we had to change our name actually, just my senior year. Our team is now called the Rapture. They still wanted us to have a Christian theme, but they helped us pick our name. So we did. We had to work with a nun liaison who helped us pick our name. She was really sweet, though. In terms of funding, our school was pretty supportive, and our budget has grown a little bit since we've become more competitive. I think you kind of have to start smaller, going to more local tournaments, but eventually, if you prove that you can play, they might be willing to send you somewhere, give you the funding to at least go by car and potentially maybe even fly in the future. Because when you play, you're actually advertising your school as well, especially if you're a good team. You might be recruiting people for the school as well as the team. So they wanted to have a good image and a good representation of them.
Awesome. Um, in terms of other types of support, what was like? Where did you guys practice? Were you guys given space? Did you have space on campus? I know a lot of D3 teams, but smaller schools have fewer facilities. What was that experience like?
Yeah, so at St. Ben's, there are some intramural fields, I think they're called. They're kind of back behind the softball field and the soccer field, and they get pretty dry. They're not as well maintained, but it is still a practice space. I think ours was not very flat either. It kind of sloped downwards, but it was pretty much open when we needed it. I think it was easier to find outdoor space in the fall and the spring than it was to find indoor space in the winter. And for living in Minnesota, our season was pretty short for the time that we got to spend outside, so that made it tough. We shared the intramural fields after school with rugby and lacrosse, so we did have to try to manage that. But there was enough space to fit us all three. It was just smaller fields and working it out between the captains. I think we did try to schedule our practices with the school so that they wouldn't interfere and have all three teams there at once. So that was pretty rare. But yeah, in the winter we had to get space indoor, and that was sharing with actual intramurals. I don't think they actually had intramurals outside at my school that I know of, but indoor they had soccer and they had basketball. So basically, our only times to practice, the earliest we could get was 9 p.m. And sometimes we'd have a practice from like 11 to midnight once a week or something like that. Um, and then on the other days it'd be like 9 to 11. So it got to be pretty tough for people who had early morning classes. I was kind of a proponent of doing early morning workouts. I liked to do that, and I would do that on my own in previous years as well. But um, it's kind of tough to motivate everybody to get there. So it's kind of based on your team and the motivation of when you'd want to work out. Because I think it's important on a small team to make sure you can all make it there. So
That's a really interesting point that I think creating that buy-in is universal across divisions, right? Not to the D3 specific, but you definitely have experience with this, and I think we're wondering, how did you deal with the gap in expectations on the team? What was there a gap? Did you do anything in particular to get everyone to go to those early morning workouts, or how'd you make it fun? That kind of thing.
yeah, so usually if we had an early morning workout, it would be for conditioning. So that's sometimes even less motivation to get there. But when everybody showed up, it was actually really fun and a great way to start the day. So I think there were a few weeks in a row, at least during the winter, I think my senior year, where it was successful. We had them outdoors. We would go and run in the mornings as well on my senior fall, and it was a really good way to start the day. And I'm not really sure. I'm not great at like motivating people because I find that motivation and I just like wonder why people don't want to come, you know. But I think really creating a positive team atmosphere where everybody's friends and it's not just a workout, it's a workout with your friends and you're all getting better as a team. So really focusing on the team chemistry and knowing that you're doing it with people that you care about helps a lot. In terms
Erynn,
of,
oh yeah,
sorry,
go ahead,
go ahead.
please. I was gonna say that as someone I've played with you a bit and I've watched you play on All Stars, and you're just a leader that leads by example, and it's great to have people like you on a team who can just say, okay, I'm working out now. You should want to do this too, and it's good to get that buy-in just by doing it yourself. Good point.
Right,
Any
yeah. I
other?
mean, it's tough when you're like telling people to do it and you wake up and you don't want to go either and you're like, okay, are people going to show up, like should I even go? But like if you're feeling like that, imagine the people who are just joining the sport and trying to get back in shape or whatever else. It's extra hard for them, and it's important to keep that positive mindset and attitude about it.
Awesome. That's a great answer. Another question we were thinking of is how did you interact with your men's team? Did you interact with your men's team at all? Yeah. How did you build up your program together?
Right. So when I joined freshman year, the teams were quite close. One of the biggest highlights of the season was spring break. We would all drive down to Georgia for high tide and stay together. The girls and the guys teams drive down and rent houses on the beach and play in the high tide tournament. I think we played on separate teams, but we would come and watch each other during the buys and things like that. And I think we kind of moved away from that a little bit toward the end of my college career, but we did still try to in the fall have practices on Fridays where we would scrimmage with the guys. And I think that was a really good opportunity for the new players to see kind of a faster moving play, especially if you don't have enough people at practice to scrimmage fully. Just throw them into a real game and tell them where to cut and have a guy throw to them, and then like try to move it down the field and see what ultimate actually looks like. Um, I I think that having a good reputation and relationship with the men's team is really important because if you go to the same tournaments, you can go and cheer each other on, and it's a lot more fun if you're there with it, if you're there with them.
Definitely. That's great. Um, okay, another question. Oh, and I should add to all of the participants, all of the six participants, that we're going to be, if you have questions, feel free to post and we can field them. We just have a few more that we all thought of that we wanted to ask Erynn to sort of fill out the story behind how she's worked on her ultimate career. And yeah, so yeah, ask questions here. Great. Another question though is great for you, Erynn, is about recruitment. And I'm wondering if a D3 school offers, I mean, you have a smaller population to recruit from, but I'm wondering if just the close-knit community that a D3 school has, if that enables you to recruit more effectively, or if you had any opinions on what worked well for you guys to recruit, like classmates or just friends, dorm
Right.
mates. Yeah.
Yeah, so every year we have the involvement fair at my school, and I think that's probably a pretty common thing. You just walk around the gym, and everybody has a table for their club, and you just get a bunch of people to sign up. And we'd always have like 50 names by the end, and we would email everybody, and then like 3 to 5, sometimes maybe even up to 10 people would come to like a practice, and then we'd see those numbers dwindle. But really, if you get even two or one person each time you go to something like that, like that can count as recruiting, and every person counts. So I think it's important to reach out to them and get them to practice, and then if you get them at practice, make sure that they have fun and feel included. I think sometimes teams can feel a little bit cliquey, especially if they are all close from past years and things like that. But encouraging the new players is really important. Um, we also tried for a couple of years, I think, like trying to have everybody bring one new person to practice, um, see if we could get people's friends involved, and especially if they were on other sports teams, like if we get soccer players or volleyball players, people who are already athletic, it helps a lot. And as a club sport, sometimes they can manage to play both seasons or at least come practice with us once in a while, and then we can try to convince them to come to the dark side.
Do you
Cool.
have a
That's
coach, Erynn?
What?
Go ahead, Al.
And so so you talked about recruitment from a personal perspective and trying to get, trying to get players involved. And you were captaining your team. Did you have a coach at any time when you were at St. Ben's, or was it just on the captains?
Yes, I one time was in Minneapolis and playing in a hat tournament, and I was on a team with a guy named Ryan Odo, and he asked where I played and asked if we had a coach, and then I got him to come coach us, and he and his friend Ty Thorson. So we had two coaches. They were both from Carleton. They would come to practice like only a few times per season, but they would try to make it to every tournament, and that helped a lot with the line calling. And I strongly believe that if you can get your new players to a tournament, like that's where the most growth happens because you kind of have a captive audience. They're there for the whole day, and they learn a lot just by watching and being thrown into a real game. So having them at the tournaments to help coach from the sideline, but also just like between games, teaching us different defenses and things to try. It really helped us. And they were most active on our team my sophomore and junior years. The senior year they came to a couple of tournaments, but I think they're actually not coaching my team anymore. So the team this year is more on their own. It sounds like they're thriving though. I think they've got a better turnout, like practice turnout this year than we've had in past years, which I'm really proud about.
Awesome. So there's, I guess, we're gonna start getting questions from a few of the participants, and we'll get to Emily's question in a second here. Before we move on, there's one thing that I am wondering about for D3 teams. I mean, what was the D3 division and the D1 division are definitely very different in terms of where they compete and how they compete. Um, but the competitive level isn't necessarily the only thing that's different. And what was hard about competing in the D3 division? I mean, what made it difficult, or were there any challenges that you came across that you didn't think you would come across?
Um, yeah, I remember. So I played in Dublin on the under 19 team on 2012 summer. So coming back for sophomore year as a captain for the first time of a college team, it was all about like managing expectations because Worlds was so fun and playing with players like who can play at that elite level at such a young age, and then coming back to a D3 school, it's just a different feel, and you have to be ready for more of a coaching role than a strictly player role. So I think it was sometimes tough for me to find that competitive drive sometimes, like at practice especially. But during tournaments, I think the level of play was pretty good. Like I was pushed during tournaments, and I was actually kind of glad we had small teams because that meant I got to play a lot. So my playing style now is just to play almost all the points, and then I don't know. It's a weird transition to go from a team like that to an elite team where you just play one and you're so tired that you need to take a sub. So it's just like a mindset switch, I think, and it can be tough to do, but it's worth it. And I think you get more out of teaching new players as well in a different way than like playing your most competitive game. But I have to say, like some of our regional games and stuff were some of my favorite games of Ultimate. Like playing against Carleton in the finals of regionals. I don't know. That was like one of the most intense games I've played. So D3
Fair
got
enough.
it going on.
All right. So we have a well. Let's see. Spencer's got a question that's sort of related. We'll get to that one, and then Emily's question will come next. Spencer's question is: did you feel like you had to adjust to the way you play in terms of physically, particularly on defense, going from elite club to D3?
Let's see. So in terms of physicality, I think to some extent, in D3, it would be easy to just like play lazy defense or try to poach a lot. And in some respects, I was able to work on like how to effectively poach. But I also on my D3 team played a lot of different kind of zone looks that can work against D3 teams that might not work against elite teams. That was kind of interesting to see how the spaces were different when you're playing against newer players versus elite players who really have every throw, who could break every zone, you know. Um, so in the D3 level, I think that it's sometimes hard to find that competitive edge, but it's also, I've been taught by multiple coaches that playing down to someone's level really is just demeaning to them. And you should always play your best defense because it teaches them and it pushes you to be better, even though it might seem easy. You're still like defense is hard no matter who you're guarding. You always have the disadvantage. So um, it's good practice with I would say not as high stakes, but still consequences. You know, like if you play bad defense in D3, you're still going to get scored on. So.
Cool. So Emily's question: how do you recommend for a team that doesn't split A/B to stay competitive in the spring season? So this is sort of a little bit queuing off of what Amy asked earlier. When there's a gap in expectations, what would your suggestion be to help teams stay competitive?
Right. So talking about like if you're one of the people who's not in the top 7, staying motivated.
Right, and how do you keep them motivated if you are in the top 7? Because you need those people there.
Right. Definitely. Um, I think it's important to have even playing time as much as you can, and definitely when you get into the competitive games, it's hard to do that if you know you're not going to win. So it's easy once you get to the top to just keep playing your top 7, but really the other people on the team have such a huge impact on the sideline and also just as subs. You know, like everybody is going to need a sub eventually, and you need to improve yourself throughout that season so that eventually you will be that A line player. Because I don't know, usually, I mean, in my experience, it works out that as you grow more experience, as you move up into the junior and senior years, you with your further experience, you are more likely to be on that higher line, I guess. But even if you're not, you're going to be friends with those people, and you're going to be cheering from them for them from the sideline and pushing them at practice, which is really important. You keep that level of play as high as it can be at practice. So they're really important players, and I don't know. I motivating people can be tough
Are there any
sometimes, but I
drills
think.
that you? Oh,
Hmm?
sorry. Yeah, I was gonna ask. Are there any drills that you ran that are uh, competitive based? So I know we do relay racing for to get in a sprint workout or competition based. Is that maybe
Yeah.
helping with Emily's question to stay competitive?
Yes. That's a good point. Yes. So in drill variations, yeah, this is something that comes up at the beginning of the season too, because you have a good mix of brand new people and people who have been playing for 3 or 4 years, and you have to kind of accommodate everybody's skill level, but also keep them interested because it's easy to just have a throwing practice, but people are going to get bored with that as well if they already know how to throw. So I think having drill variants, like even the go-to drill, if you start just straight on and then you throw in something like, oh, you can only catch it with one hand, like that's going to be a challenge for even the best players if you're running full speed, or putting on a mark. I think people learn faster than you think. So I think one of my issues when I was captaining was trying to make everything super easy and make sure everybody understood. But if you just throw them into it, I think people learn really fast. And so in terms of competitive drills, we called it the schmearing drill. It's basically you make like an M cut and you're just trying to play physical defense, like rubbing shoulders with somebody and um, really vying for that space. And I think that's something that a lot of D3 women especially struggle with is the physicality part, and really just leaning into it can teach them to play much better defense, and just like forcing them to do stuff like that. And you're playing defense against the top player on your team, but if they're making a slow cut, you can really get the feel of it before you start going full speed, and then all of a sudden you're good at defense and you are that much closer to that top seven. So.
That's great.
Cool. Oh, all right. So let's open it up. I mean, I think we've gotten to the point, the end of our questions. I would love, I mean, sort of in this setting, feel free to ask anything for the people um, who are in this webinar. Feel free to ask. This is your chance, and it's actually a great chance to ask because there's not a ton of people. So if there's anything you want to know, let us know. Emily is currently typing. So.
Yeah, I think that we never had a B team on any of the teams I've played on, so I haven't really had to deal much with that. But it can be tough, I think, if you're like working so hard and then you can never quite get there because your team already has those people on it that they need. Uh,
Erynn, for you, what was the coolest part of playing in St. Ben's? What was the absolute best thing you did while you were in college?
oh man.
I heard the Carleton game was pretty great.
The Carleton game. Yeah, I think that was junior year. It's pretty intense. Pretty big sidelines. It's always exciting when there's big sidelines, like at the end of a tournament. People are coming to watch the final. Uh, Playing at nationals is always really fun too. I know my junior year we had a really big senior class. So a lot of people graduated right before my senior year, and it was actually um, nationals was on graduation weekend, so people had to sacrifice that. They didn't walk at graduation because they were playing at nationals, which I thought was awesome. And some of them actually brought their graduation gowns and played in them for a couple points. That was really fun. Um,
That's awesome.
yeah, I've met players now who I see around in club, and D3 I think is more of a smaller community, so we play against each other a lot, especially if you're in the same region, and I'll definitely remember them for years to come if they're playing club. So.
So Emily wants to go back to the question a little bit to get a little bit more clarity. Um, if you don't split A and B, and you were talking about playing even lines, so at times you could lose by playing even lines. But how would you stay competitive if you only have a few people on that team? If you have, I guess, if you can't split, how do you stay competitive?
Right. Um, I think this was actually kind of an issue on my team because for a while when we got our coaches, it was fun for me because they would put me in a lot, and I think that was actually a detriment to the team. So I think it's important to realize what you're doing to yourself based on the lines you play because tournaments are where you learn the most, and especially in the spring, well, especially in the fall tournaments is what I'll say. You need to get all the new people playing a lot. And then in the spring, in those close games, if it's not going to like ruin your season, you should put them in on that game winning point, like let them feel that rush because someday when you need them in that role, then they'll have the experience with it. So um, I would say make sure everybody's being rotated in, and I don't like it when it's unfair like that. If it starts being just the top seven. So on our team, I think we tried to make sure that we had a couple really strong throwers, but then rotate through a lot of our other players to make sure everybody is feeling included on the team and got some good playing time against some of the best teams in the D3 division. So
Awesome.
it's
So
more about just winning. Yeah, more than just winning games. It's kind of setting yourself up for the future. So.
and eventually you set yourself up, you can win games in the future, hopefully.
Right, exactly.
Um, LT has a question. I think we're getting a little bit more detail on it, but so you mentioned you went to High Tide for spring break, played down there. Did you get school funding for that trip? I mean, we'll start with that question.
Yeah, so we never asked for specific funding to spring break. Um, we, yeah, I'm pretty sure we self-funded those trips. And because it was the whole team going and we were just renting one house, we just had to split the gas and the food and the houses between 20 some, 30 some people. So I think I would usually pay $200 or $300 for the week, which would cover all of the food and gas and everything. So the school would not give us money to go to a spring break tournament, I guess, is the answer to that question.
Got it.
I think
If
to
we were
add
playing
on
in a sanctioned tournament on one of the weekends,
yeah, to add on to that, I think the most honesty that you have with your club team, the better, and don't break rules with the rental company because they can contact your club team managers at school.
right.
It is definitely true. And for the record, sometimes when your club sports departments get contacted, eventually USA Ultimate does get contacted as well. Um, so it can affect your playing status. Just know that. Um, so Kevin will follow up on Emily's question a bit, but before we get back to Emily's question, he's got some things to say. Becca's got a question. As a captain, how did you set expectations for the entire team of aggressiveness and desire to win on the field?
All right. Yeah. So these are hard things to instill if they're not there. So my biggest goal from like goal setting in general, I guess, the easiest way to go about it is to ask the team what their expectations are and just build off of that so that it's their idea. And if you're pushing them, it's because they wanted to. Um, because if it's all you, then people just maybe will grow to resent you. But if they're willing to say that they're in it, then you can hold them accountable. So, and if your team, I think it's something that you need to judge as a team. Like if you want to be a fun team that goes to tournaments and parties at tournaments and has a good time and also plays pretty well sometimes, that's fine. And if you want to be a really competitive D3 team, you have to know that people are invested, and that's not something you can just force them to do because people don't respond well to that. So, yeah, I would say ask them for their goals and then work off of that.
Cool.
I'll chime in on that too. I know for goal setting, yeah, I'll chime in for the goal setting part. I think that I could see people setting, let's say, 3 personal goals and 3 team goals at the beginning of the season. It really helps even a rookie to kind of set clear expectations. It might even be of just saying, hey, throw a forehand in a game. And that can be a very simple personal goal that at a beginning tournament that someone can achieve. And then 2-3 months in, revisit some of those goals for those new players. And also, it's good to see what they are setting as team goals. A team goal might be win a game at conferences or just attend conferences. in that first season. And I think as people are seeing those individual goals and team goals being accomplished, it really starts to kind of generate that excitement for the team, but also I think consistency and, as Erin's alluded to many times, just getting people back on the field.
Awesome.
I'm going to chime in on Emily's real quickly, that she put a 30-person roster, which is awesome, by the way. I love hearing that there's a 30-person roster and what you can do with that. I think there's actually some advantages that you may have there, and it's at Brandis, correct? Where you might have advantages over teams. I mean, the first, I think the level of competitiveness at practices already raises a bar a little bit, that you can have 12 versus 12, 14 versus 14 people at practices where you're actually playing at that level that people would be at a tournament. I think another thing to consider, and this is up for debate, I would love for other people to chime in on this, but at tournaments you really have some flexibility that you can even start to implement some strategies that only maybe club teams or the highest level college teams begin to think of having people specialize a little bit. And it doesn't mean they can't develop that whole skill set at practices and go beyond, but people can really hone in on developing some of those skill sets to look at, maybe you think about having offensive and defensive lines, or just having people build up in those areas, or having that competition, as Erynn alluded to before, between those individuals, having a sideline person assigned to a person on the field, so they're constantly being that second or third set of eyes, which is tremendous help up there. So just having those individuals at tournaments and practice can really lead to some fun results for you guys.
Yeah, I really like
Tom, you want
listening there too. With like, if you can have a line of a specific zone who like just those seven know it really well, and that's what they go in and do, that is awesome. Like we had lines like that on my team where it would be that specific seven who knew their exact role, and they would just go in and everybody knew what they were doing. And then they'd play the point and then come off and they did their job.
Awesome. Georgia has a
I'll put
question.
one caveat in for. Oh, I was going to have one caveat in before I say. I would absolutely, though, go back and say keep building well-rounded players at the college level specifically, too. I love Erin's point, and I'm more going back to what I said on kind of specializing, still honing those skills and building up those players, but also understanding that each person should walk away with some developed skills throughout the season.
Awesome. Georgia has a question. How do you keep energy up at practice and use practice time efficiently?
With 30 players.
Yeah.
I'll start and give Erynn a minute to think and develop a better answer than I'll give. But I would actually start with saying, think about doing like a schedule. I mean, think about doing kind of an agenda, at least for the big ones leading up to the series or a big tournament, really breaking it down for saying, hey, for this 15-minute block, we're going to work on mark drills. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to work on conditioning, and having a little bit of a schedule. And yeah, you can deviate plus or minus 5 minutes from that, but it will, I think, give people an expectation going in of what they can expect if they come late, what they're missing. But then also, I think, keep people accountable to keep the practice moving to finish efficiently in 2 hours or what your practice might be. But I'll pass the torch off to Erynn to keep going.
Yeah, so that can definitely be an issue. And I think one thing would be, like he was saying, having a plan for practice. If people know what the focus is, if you can have like drills focusing on that, and then you go into a scrimmage at the end where you can see those new skills in action. I talked to the assistant coach this summer of the under 23 team, Lauren Boyle, about some coaching things because she coaches the Colorado Collie team. And she was saying that really what you need to implement in practice is competitive drills, because that is what drives people. If you can compete with your teammates and still keep that like friendly nature, good spirit, competition is what is going to keep them coming back, and you want the competitive people to come back. So pick drills that are like scrimmages, but like you can pick any fun rules. Just kind of mix it up. There's a lot of scrimmages I've played, like 5-pull or double score, or like having consequences for turns, like count the number of turns you do that many push-ups or something like that, or playing unsided unfair sided scrimmages. I forget what that's called, but having like 6-on-7, trying to figure out how you can still play defense with only 6 people on the field. Just throw something into the game that makes you think more on your toes, and it still is working on the skills you need for ultimate.
Yeah. Sarah has a
I
question.
love what Erynn added there too.
Go for it,
I was
Kevin.
just going
Sorry.
to chime in. I love what Erynn added about taking those drills and then doing a scrimmage to 3, a scrimmage to 5 with those skill sets. I actually had an experience a few years back that a very experienced team that got so huck happy that it was always a problem at tournaments. So the scrimmages were actually around, if anything was thrown over 30 yards, it was a turnover. And we were just, people wanted to work on smaller things. So be creative. Think of those ways. Hey, we worked on this skill set in the first hour. How do we integrate that into our scrimmage that we're ending practice with?
Mm-hmm.
Sarah's got a question here. How would you suggest implementing outside practice fitness? It's hard to organize, coordinate 20 plus people, and a lot of our players say they'll do workouts on their own, but there's no accountability. I can chime in a little bit here in terms of what my experience was in college, and Erynn, I'll give you a little bit of time to think. For me in college, what we did was we split up our fitness groups, our outside of practice, into smaller groups, so 4 or 5, and then we had a captain of each one of those groups. And that captain of the fitness group was responsible for emailing that small group and getting them to go out. Sometimes we, sometimes we sometimes we combined groups and did bigger fitness oriented things, but you want to create accountability for other people to the extent that it's possible. That's one way that we did it. Erynn, I don't know if you have different thoughts or if you guys did it a different way, but it's one thing that we did.
Yeah, I think in general my team wasn't the best at that when I was there. There were some times where we would all make it to a conditioning practice, and if people didn't come to it, we would try to write out what we did so that people could do it on their own later. And it was more of an honor system. But if you want to have more accountability, I don't know. My team has a GroupMe. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but it's basically just a group text. And I've seen teams do it where once you finish the workout, you just take a selfie with whoever was there and say like, "Hey, we did it," and that's just a fun way to share with people and be proud of the work that you put in with your teammates.
Becca, those groups met about once or twice a week, depending on how many practices we had and whether or not we had a tournament. So it depends. Certainly once a week when we did meet. So, any other questions before we move on? Before you guys go, there's a couple things that we want to plug that are going on here, or one thing that's going on here at USA Ultimate. But I want to make sure everybody had an opportunity to ask what they wanted before we go on and do that.
Becca, it's hard to describe specific competitive drills the teams do. I think Erynn alluded to a lot of bodying up. They're great. I think there are online resources for that, and we should compile them better than how I know that they're compiled. But I don't know if you guys have a quick drill that you think is competitive, and I know I prefer one-on-one situations, so you isolate a player and they have to beat their defense. Mini is awesome for competitiveness.
Basically, yeah, anything that you can put defense on, put defense on. So anytime you're doing a throwing drill, put a mark on it. Anytime you're trying to catch the frisbee, have a defender, or just pretend you're both on offense or both on defense. Like make it so that you're always in competition for the disc.
Yeah.
Yep. One stemming off of that teams have done I've seen is have a stack of, it could be 3 or 4 people in a vertical stack, and you have one defender that it's kind of a conditioning drill too, because you'll have them continually be the defender on the 3 or 4 cutters. And there's one thrower, and the cutter can actually decide on a whim to go deep or to go in, and the defender has to stay with him or her the entire time. So you'll kind of going through that 3 or 4 times, and you can see right away maybe 2 are deep, 2 are in. you're getting your conditioning in as well as playing tough man defense there too. So there's a lot of good opportunities, and I think, as Amy said, kind of compiling those would be great. I'll even share with her later on. There's an awesome zone drill out there that you kind of make these 3 rectangles, and it's a really 3-on-3 game of mini, and you have to kind of stay to your rectangle as a defense, but you're consistently communicating to your teammates, and it really helps what maybe a short deep would do with their wings or a short deep would do with their cup. So a lot of cool things, and I think even for smaller teams, there are great 3-on-3 drills, great things where smaller teams can get a lot of effectiveness out of practices.
Awesome. So before we go, I want to just dive in a little bit about sort of what we're doing with these webinars and sort of what USA Ultimate is trying to do to help programs and sort of start getting the word out. So this webinar is part of the season training and recruitment series, the STAR program, and our goal is we're looking for new ways to help teams build, getting people like Erynn who have gone through it in the D3 division, and tomorrow we've got people like Sheena and Claire who have done it in the women's division in D1 who are going to be presenting. We want to get people access to people within the Ultimate community. The other things that we have started thinking about and are about ready to roll out is how can we help teams on campus. What you see in the bottom left screen is the front side of the Achieving Collegiate Excellence program. It's the ACE program. We're going to announce it on USA Ultimate's website this week. It's coming out. What it is it's an incentive or excellence program that's modeled off of other club programs that have done it, basically as a way to recognize schools and recognize teams and programs who are embodying the USA Ultimate mission and really doing good things on campus, and it gives them a chance to be recognized for things that are not just competitive excellence. So things that we value: community service, longevity, stability. These are the things that we're going to start looking at. So the mission statement for the ACE program is providing a structure to incentivize and recognize growth and sustainability of college development programs based on team development and alignment with the USA Ultimate mission, character, community, and competition. And we want to help you go to your rec sports department and say, hey, we're a 5-star team recognized by USA Ultimate. Can you help give us some funding? And this is hopefully going to help kickstart the small teams that aren't going to nationals every year. Also, we're sponsored by Breakmark, and we're going to get teams that are part of the program a lot of cool stuff. So a little bit of some incentive there to join. Hopefully you guys can be on the lookout for the program. Amy and Kevin, do you guys have anything you want to add about the program and sort of talk through it?
Amy, you can go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I'm really excited about it. I think we're all really excited about this program. It's just an opportunity for you guys to show how much you're doing outside the field, so off the field. Thank you. Yeah, it's an opportunity for us to reward you guys for doing great things in your community and with your program and building each other up. And you can use this for funding opportunities to brag about yourself, put it on your website, and just get that recognition that you deserve. Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, be on.
Absolutely, I think.
Go for it, Kevin.
Oh, good. I was going to say, just absolutely. I think what Amy mentioned there is important, that we want to make sure that teams are being recognized by their club sports, are being recognized across their school. We want this to lead into funding opportunities, into ways to maybe host tournaments that you weren't otherwise able to, because they understand how your program is doing all those things around character, community, and competition. One thing we do want throughout this year as the pilot year is feedback on this. If it's things that you feel the tweaks in the application, things we aren't measuring, and things that your school is doing, we want to hear those stories. We also want to use this as a chance for us to hear the stories of what people are doing across the country that we wouldn't hear otherwise. So please feel free to share all those, and I'm sure we'll be in touch about kind of how do we spread those out throughout the country.
Cool. If any other questions on that, we're reaching the end of the hour. We're excited about it. Erynn, I want to say thank you so much for giving up your time. You did an awesome job. Can anybody reach? I mean, if anybody would like to reach out with some other questions you thought of later, you can absolutely email me or any of the national directors. You can email me or any of the national directors, and we'll get those questions out there. This is going to be recorded. Has been recorded and is going to be put on the internet by the end of the week is our goal. So, for those of you who know people who didn't get a chance to hear Erynn talk, there's still another opportunity, and so we'll get it out there and hopefully get it publicized. Thank you all for attending, and we will talk to you guys soon. See you on the field. Hey, have you got Kevin?